Welcome to Mac Stories Unwind, the show that's all about the picks. Today's show is brought to you by SaneBox. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We have a couple of fun picks today, but I wanted to kick things off before we have our individual picks and talk to you about a couple of mini topics.
Okay, mini topics. That's fun.
Yeah.
Mini topic. Okay.
Yeah. The first one is a teachy thumbs up or thumbs down, because you texted me the other night and told me that you were listening to Phoebe Bridgers, and I never got the answer. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Because I know you've been a skeptic in the past.
I have been a skeptic, but I'm also known for changing my mind. I think being able to change your mind about something is a great quality, and to say when you're wrong. And I was wrong about Phoebe Bridgers. It's a huge thumbs up.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it.
2 records and the Boy Genius record that just came out. That's a super group made comprised of Phoebe Bridgers and Julian Baker and Lucy Dacus.
Dacus, yes.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I'm a convert. I think.
All right.
I don't. Maybe at the time I wasn't in the right mindset, and I don't know. I think somehow my brain always confused Phoebe Bridgers' music. This is gonna sound silly. Don't ask me why. With Fleet Foxes.
Oh, that's very different music.
Yes, that's probably. Look, I don't know why. I was like, hey, I went into Phoebe Bridgers sort of expecting like really slow and mellow and sad, like folk music.
Yeah, it has an air of that and there, and the older stuff especially. But it's not. Yeah, I know.
Well, look, but it's not Fleet Foxes.
No, it's not Fleet Foxes at all. I am very pleased that you like it. I will say that I've been trying to wear you down on Phoebe Bridgers for like 2 years now.
That is also true. Yes.
So I guess my long con worked. But all right, well, I have a couple of recommendations for you, singles that are maybe a little harder to find, because Phoebe Bridgers does a bunch of recording outside of her albums, in between the albums, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. I'll send you a couple of links. Anyway, that's mini topic number 1. All right, Federico, I have a second mini topic for you, because I want to get your take on this weird story that I think appeared first in Variety about Mario and mobile gaming, because in particular smartphone gaming, not just mobile in terms of things like handheld game consoles. This is really a smartphone thing, and it's getting reported everywhere. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it that Miyamoto said that the future of Mario isn't on cell phones. I was like, as though the assumption was that was a thing. Who would ever believe that Mario was someday going to be a mobile phone phenomenon? I don't know.
Look, not me, for sure.
Nintendo's never suggested anything close to that, and their games have not done particularly well on the App Store or Android, I don't think.
Well, I think there's always been a part of the gaming press and the tech press that I've always considered Nintendo to be on the brink of bankruptcy, or even worse, on the brink of irrelevancy.
True.
And even though time and time again, Nintendo has showed them how they can, they are a very resilient company when it comes to facing failures, of which they've had many in the company's lifetime. They've had many failures, but they've always come back with success after success. And if those who have not been paying attention to Nintendo, I guess the reason they're wrong is that they lack this sort of historical context.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's always going to be a portion of the gaming media and the press, the tech press, who are going to argue that Nintendo is going to be irrelevant because now the future... Well, a few years ago, the future was mobile gaming. And then the future became, 4K and HDR. And then the future became VR, and then the future became cloud gaming, and arguably that's
streaming,
streaming and cloud gaming. So, but Nintendo, Nintendo is always gonna be always gonna go in its own direction. But when it comes to this article that you sent us today, look, I honestly don't know who was thinking that Nintendo and Mario was gonna land on mobile as the default, sort of the go-to, if you allow me the pun, platform for
Right.
Mario games. I just feel like this is a sort of theory that the press made up, and now they are sad to report that it didn't come true. But nobody ever said
Right.
it. Nobody at Nintendo, never Miyamoto, nobody said it.
Well,
So
it's like they pulled out. First of all, it was the dumbest possible question, in my opinion, that you could ask Miyamoto. It's like, is the future of gaming with Mario on the iPhone or smartphones? And of course, he's going to say no. I mean, it's like one of those things where it's a manufactured story, basically, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, I think it's a manufactured story for sure. Yes.
All right. Well, let's get on to the picks, Federico.
Well, speaking of Nintendo, you have an interesting pick.
I do. It's a movie called Tetris, which is on Apple TV Plus. And if you like video games, especially if you like mobile games, you're going to love this movie. I mean, it's a fictionalized version of the story of how Tetris started as a video game on PCs in Russia or in the Soviet Union in the 80s and made its way to Nintendo's Game Boy and took over the world basically. And it's for a business movie, it's surprisingly exciting. It's really a thriller when it comes right down to it, because a lot of this movie depends on back and forth between the Soviet Union, the US, and England. And, people are flying here and there, and they're having contract negotiations. And you would think that contract negotiations would not be the most exciting thing to make a movie about.
Right.
But it
About
actually, yeah, but it really is. I mean, because it starts out with Hank Rogers is the kind of the main protagonist in this story. He's the person who ended up bringing Tetris to America and the rest of the world. And he was at CES in 1988 trying to sell a game based on Go, which is the board game Go for PCs. And he saw a version of Tetris playing on a PC when he was there and was captivated by it. And then you have like these scenes of him trying to convince his banker to give him money so he can license the game. And ultimately, he gets mixed up in basically a bidding war with Robert Maxwell, who was a big kind of kingpin media guy in England back in the day, ran tabloids, ran a lot of media businesses, ultimately got sent to jail, I believe, because he looted the company's pension fund for millions of dollars. And so he was competing with this solo guy with this small company in the northwest of the US for Tetris. And Hank Rogers tried to just get the Japanese rights. And then he tried to get, other rights. And so there's a lot of back and forth and shenanigans going on in terms, backroom deals between the Soviets and Robert Maxwell. Because Robert Maxwell is essentially, at one point, trying to trade Tetris for rights to distribute encyclopedias in the Soviet Union. So it would be like a trade in kind. There wouldn't actually be any money that would pass hands. But Tetris, I mean, the Soviets were wise enough, to what Maxwell was trying to do. They realized that Tetris was a big deal because it was on PCs in the Soviet Union and it became such an obsession that they had to create programs in their government offices to remove it from PCs so people wouldn't play it all day long at their jobs. And so Rogers ends up going to the Soviet Union. It's the late 80s. The wall hadn't fallen in East Berlin yet. I mean, Gorbachev was in power, and the Soviet Union was starting to crumble a little bit, but it certainly wasn't gone yet. And he shows up on a tourist visa to try to negotiate a deal for Tetris with a government agency in the Soviet Union, and he's being followed by the KGB, and there's a lot of intrigue there. Now, there are a lot of parts of this that as I've read, have been kind of made up, like to make it more exciting, but it is a pretty cool story, and it is ultimately real in the sense that this is kind of how it all went down with the negotiations. And, this was an era where it was 1988. People weren't sending emails to try to license Tetris. They had to fly, this guy had to fly to Moscow. And then when he was having problems with Robert Maxwell, he had to fly to London. And it's just really cool. The other part, I guess the other scene that I loved a lot, which made me think a lot about the original iPhone, is that at one point, Hank Rogers is in negotiations with Nintendo about putting Tetris on every Game Boy when it comes out. Now, the scene starts before he knew that the Game Boy even existed, but he's led into a room where there's a cloth over a thing. He signs an NDA, and they reveal a Game Boy hooked up to a bunch of, with a bunch of wires.
That's not dramatic at all.
No, right. And there's a bunch of wires trailing out of it because it's like a testing laboratory, right? So they're like loading software onto it and things. And he's like, wait a second. And he has Tetris on his laptop, and he quickly changes the code a little bit and loads it onto the Game Boy, and everybody is astounded. But, I'm sure that it didn't work quite like that. Like, he typed a few lines of code, and now it's running on a Game Boy instead of a PC. But it was a very dramatic moment and really cool. And I just found this movie a lot of fun. I was expecting it. I knew from the trailers that I thought I would probably like it. But if you like it's got a little bit of comedy to it too, and there's a nice relationship between the Russian creator of Tetris, and Hank Rogers that's developed during the story. And there's car chases, and there's evil-looking KGB agents following people around, and all kinds of intrigue like that. And it's a lot of fun. I think you'd like it a lot.
Nice. How long is it?
I think it's like 2 hours.
Nice. And it's on Apple TV Plus. So.
Yes, it is.
Very nice. Very nice.
This episode of Mac Stories Unwind is brought to you by SaneBox. Inbox Zero is a thing of the past. We're all so inundated with email now that it's no longer about responding to everything. It's about responding only to the important things, the messages that truly matter. And that's where SaneBox comes in. Think of it as a robotic Marie Kondo for your email. As messages flow into SaneBox, it does the triage for you, leaving only the important emails in your inbox and directing all of the other distracting stuff to your Sane Later folder, so you know what messages to pay attention to now and what stuff can wait for later. There's also a nifty feature called the Sane Black Hole, where you can drag messages from annoying senders so you never hear from them again. And you can set reminders for yourself with Sane Reminders. There's even a new Deep Clean feature that helps you batch process old email to free up storage space so you don't have to pay extra for email storage to your provider. See how SaneBox can magically remove distractions from your inbox with a free 2-week trial. Visit sanebox.com/MacStories today to start your free trial and get a $25 credit. That's SANEBOX.com/MacStories. Our thanks to SaneBox for their support of the show.
Okay, so I also have an Apple TV Plus pick. Now, this is a TV show that I think is already wrapped up. Season 1 has been renewed for Season 2. We are almost halfway through with Season 1, so this is not a definitive pick. I know that you've finished this one. It's going to be finished in a couple of days. It's Shrinking. Now, let me tell you, John, I was very skeptical of this
So
one.
good. So good.
It's so good. I love it. So, Shrinking is a comedy drama series by Bill Lawrence, Jason Segel, and Brett Goldstein.
Why were you skeptical?
Okay. I was skeptical because from the trailer, I thought it was going to be a really, really heavy TV show.
Oh, okay. I get
think
it.
the original trailer didn't do a good enough job at conveying the mix of drama because
Yes.
I'm gonna get to this in a minute, but also the comedic aspects of this series.
It is heavy in its own way, but
Yes.
it treats very serious subjects with comedy in a way that I think works surprisingly well.
I mean, look, this is a Bill Lawrence show, and I should have known that Shrinking's approach to serious topics intermixed with comedic aspects and just funny situations. I should have known what to expect because this guy Bill Lawrence is also the creator of Scrubs, one of my all-time
Oh, I
favorite
didn't know
series.
that.
Yeah, Bill Lawrence, creator of Scrubs, and in fact, I'm gonna give you some details here. There's a lot of Scrubs elements here, sort of like just the how the show alternates between like really serious stuff, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute, and also sort of the more lighthearted sort of describing everything with the comedy angle.
Hmm.
That is the Scrubs playbook. And there's also some some actors, for example, in this one in Shrinking, Krista Miller, for example, she plays the role of Liz,
Hmm.
the next door neighbor of the main protagonist of this show. Krista Miller, she was in another Bill Lawrence TV show, Cougar Town. Terrible name, absolutely fun and lighthearted, and really good sort of sitcom from a few years ago, from 2009. Yeah, it was actually 6 seasons of Cougar Town. Cougar Town starring, in fact, Krista Miller. Krista Miller, she was also in Scrubs. And Courtney Cox. You may know Courtney Cox from
Yep.
a little show called Friends. And Busy Phillips and others. Anyway, I've always been a huge fan of Bill Lawrence's shows, including, of course, in more recent memory, Ted Lasso.
Yes.
In fact, Brett Goldstein, who you may know as Roy Kent from Ted Lasso, is an executive producer on Shrinking, and also an executive producer and the main protagonist of Shrinking is Jason Segel from, you may know him from a bunch of movies like Knocked Up, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, I Love You Man, and of course another little sitcom called How I Met Your Mother
Right.
from a few years ago. Anyway. Is it Segel or Siegel? But probably Siegel.
Siegel, I think.
Siegel, yeah.
Yeah. As an aside, Federico, there's a good walk. I think it's called Walk with Me. It's one of those Apple Fitness.
You told me about this.
Yeah, it's quite good. It's a nice conversation with him. It's like maybe 20, 25 minutes long. You go for a walk and listen to it, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, I should actually. I want to try that. The sort of the walk with me, whatever they're called. I want to try those.
Yeah, there are a lot of those that are people who I'm not really that interested in, but his was particularly good. And it was good enough that I thought, you know what, I should probably try some of these that are people who I don't really know much about, because I bet they'll be good too, because, I think the production value is just very, very high.
So anyway, Shrinking. The main story is, the story is about Jimmy. Jimmy is a therapist who works at the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Center. I'm not sure about the location of Shrinking. Do we know where Shrinking takes place? Is it?
I think it's in Northern California. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, is it in Los Angeles? I just
or it
got
could be Los
California
Angeles.
vibe.
I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be California.
Okay, it's supposed to be California. Interesting. So Jimmy is a therapist who, as the show begins, is dealing with really hard and severe grief following the death in an accident of his wife. And Jimmy, has been dealing with this grief for the better part of a year at this point. He has a daughter named Alice, teenage daughter. They live together after the death of Alice's mom and Jimmy's wife. And he's been dealing with this grief for the past year. And the show begins, and we see him just being outside at night in his pool with two young girls just drinking, taking drugs, sort of like, and his neighbor, played by Krista Miller, Liz, sort of acts as a mother figure for Alice, and also kind of as a mother figure for Jimmy in a way. And Jimmy, despite this really sad and difficult situation, he continues to go to work, where his colleagues are at this behavioral cognitive therapy center. We see Paul Rhodes, Dr. Paul Rhodes, a senior therapist, played by Harrison Ford, and Paul has Parkinson's disease. And Gabby, another therapist working with Jimmy, played by Jessica Williams. This show, which I gotta say, I am loving so far. I was expecting this show to be really heavy, really sad, really bumming me out. Like, oh, it's a guy, it's about a guy who lost his wife, and it's about grief. And it's about, this guy going through his own stuff, but he's also supposed to help other people because he's a therapist. And I don't think the trailer, like I said, I don't think the trailer did a good enough job describing sort of the vibe and the attitude of Shrinking, because there's a lot of heart and there's a lot of comedy in a show that it's ostensibly about drama, about family drama, about loss, about death, and about sort of helping other people go through their issues. Because the premise of Shrinking is Jimmy, decides to make a change in his personal and professional life, and by telling his patients exactly what he thinks and exactly what they should do, which is a huge violation of every possible ethical code for therapists. But that sort of dynamic creates the type of show that very much in a Ted Lasso way becomes really about the relationship between the people. The relationship between the therapists and Alice and Liz, Jimmy and Liz, Jimmy and Alice, Jimmy and his patients. For example, so far we are up to episode 4, and the relationship between Jimmy and Sean, one of his patients who's going through PTSD, is a veteran who came back to America after he was stationed in Afghanistan, I believe. So that relationship is so well developed, at least based on what I've seen so far.
It's very good, and it gets better.
Oh, it gets better. So see, but all of this, like all of these serious themes, how they are intermixed with, just funny things that Jimmy does, or I think there's an art to being able to, in a movie or in a TV show or in a book, to being able to produce irony and make people smile even when you are describing a really sad situation.
Right.
And I think that is the single quality that is sort of making me fall in love with Shrinking, is in so many different moments of the show, even when the main character is going through some really serious stuff, or maybe one of his patients is going through some really serious stuff, the show finds a way to make you laugh, or to make you smile, to make you chuckle, even for just a few seconds. And that is so difficult to do, and to do it with good taste, to do it in a thoughtful way, which is exactly what Shrinking does. So
yeah, it has a lot in common with Ted Lasso that way. I think of it in terms of, like when Ted Lasso starts having his panic attacks and he has his relationship with his wife that's falling apart. It's handled in a similar way in Ted Lasso. The thing that's different about Shrinking is that basically every character has their own thing that they're dealing with, whether it's, some sort of loss or medical issue or mental health issue, whatever it happens to be, they all have their own problems. And so it kind of permeates the show more than it does in Ted Lasso. Federico, I'm really glad you like it. I mean, I think you will find that I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there are some tearjerker moments towards the end of the season. Okay. But not in kind of a really down or sad way. I mean, it's true to the show in terms of it's just a show with a lot of heart that really gets you at tugs at your heartstrings towards the end. But I really loved it. I think it's a fantastic show, and I can't wait for season 2, because they left at least one cliffhanger for season 2 in terms of what, where they're going to pick up with the story. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks again for joining us. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. I want to thank our sponsor, too. That's SaneBox. We're also on Mastodon. Just go to vitici.macstories.net or johnvorhees.macstories.net. You will find a follow button there, and you can follow us. Also, we're on Instagram, where Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.